I'll hold off. Did everybody get bios ahead of time? Okay, so you know who everyone is and what they do. So maybe we'll hold off on a formal round of introductions. Sort of as it goes down the line, you can sort of reintroduce yourself. I think the first topic, and these are all ideas that came from the undergraduates, so thank you for those submitted ideas and the questions on the topics that you want to discuss. One of them we're calling Unpacking the Toolkit. And what I'd like each panelist to do is reflect on what personal tools, I'm going to read it because this is what somebody wrote. What personal tools did Swarthmore enhance, and how did this position you for your career? What was missing, and how did you fill in these gaps? And what non-academic lessons or experiences helped prepare you for your career? And we'll have a few other topics as well, but we can start with that. I think you get the questions in it. Hearing it for the first time. So it's what personal tools did Swarthmore enhance? How did it position you for your career? What was missing? How did you fill in those gaps? And what non-academic lessons or experiences helped you prepare for your career?
Me?
Yeah, I'm the moderator. I'll round it out as well.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Khadija White. Personal tools from SWAT. I think one of the most helpful things I got from Swarthmore was actually writing. I came in, and I think for most people, you come in, you are really used to being able to write something very quickly and get a really good grade for it. And then you come in and you have pass-fail first semester, and the professors make it really clear that that's not going to be you. So I had to really work on my writing and kind of figure out how to do structures. I really use the Writing Resource Center like a lot. I got a WOM, which is like a writing system. So do they still do it? Yeah, so the WOM was with me for like all of Swarthmore. And it meant that I think my writing was done really well. I just got published in the Atlantic like a couple weeks ago. I think that was the thing I took. Yeah. And I started there to soar, and so organizing was another curricular thing that I did that with Karen.
We can, unless someone wants to jump.
Well, I actually don't even know so I'm next and I'll jump in. Anybody here last week? Anybody see me here last week? Cool, thank you for coming. Thank you. Little fan base. So it was bad that I didn't mean to do this, sit down next to Khadija, but you have the two academics are sitting next to each other, so my answer would probably be the same thing. I teach, I'm at Brown, the lowly postdoc, but I teach undergraduates, and the most important thing about a liberal arts education is learning how to learn, and in learning how to learn, you have to learn how to communicate. So learning how to write was the most important thing I probably got out of Swarthmore. And I didn't, leaving Swarthmore, I thought I was a good, okay to good writer. And then I started reading other people's stuff that were in graduate school with me or even postdocs, and I was just, even some of the principal investigators I've worked with, they'll send me papers and it's just gibberish and it doesn't make any coherent sense at all. And so that's Swarthmore. That's not for me reading literature and stuff like that. Swarthmore did a good job beating that into me. But I came in with a curiosity. So here's the humor. I was in a fraternity, so that curiosity was honed into an ability to kind of solve any ridiculous problem that you could possibly come up with.
You have
lots of ridiculous and Brandon and I were talking about this today. It's like we have gotten so good at fixing anything, any problem, because you just get confronted with all of these. Like some of the best parts of the education were the unexpected stuff you get outside of the classroom, right? From your peers or the stupid things they do. So, I tell my high school mentees and undergraduates that the reason you're at school is really to socialize, to network, to learn how to learn. And you're kind of blessed in that here. You have a great environment.
Yeah, and reading is really important, right? By the way. People want to write, but they don't want to read.
Is that the professor and you coming out? efficiently, and you have to prioritize certain things because you have such a high volume of reading and homework. So that's really what I took out of it, really enhanced my work ethic, I think, and made me more productive.
I'm Jude O'Reilly. I was class of 94 and a half. I actually thought, there's a reason for that, which I can explain over there. I spent about 18 years in high tech, of which the last 5 or so was at Amazon.com. And I thought Swarthmore was a fantastic foundation for that life. Amazon was a very narrative-driven culture, so I would basically bring my essay for the year to Jeff Bezos. He would read it in front of me with his peers and mine, and he'd sort of grade it, and we'd have a discussion, which was not unlike the last history seminar, I had, except it was we were talking about Stalin, not, cloud-based services. So I actually thought there's a lot of big debate in our culture right now about the value of a liberal arts education. I personally never had that debate professionally. I felt like what I learned here, the ability to craft and defend and change an idea with the input of your peers and to make that idea better and then to do it again the next week is exactly what I've done professionally, and Swarthmore was a fine foundation for that. The question was also what was missing, and I actually found that quite hard based upon the experience that I had. I came in here pretty bad at math, and I left here pretty bad at math. It turns out that if you want to have a career in business, it's handy to be able to handle percentages in your head and manage a P&L and sort of think quantitatively. Just personally, that was not a road that I went down when I was here or chose to really deepen, and I might do that differently. I don't think that was for lack of opportunity at Swarthmore. Obviously, there's a fine mathematics department, which I chose never to darken the door of. But that was one kind of area of just kind of broad-based horizontal skill, which I didn't develop here. But that was far away by the work I did gain and the experience I did gain in just understanding and defending ideas.
My name is Amber Cameron. I know I'm sitting next to Jude. I was 2004 and a half. And I think the most important thing that I got out of my Swarthmore education was really, it kind of goes back to narrative, and which Jude touched upon, and perspective taking. So being able to see different sides of the same story and help everyone to feel that their position's being heard and create and craft a solution where everyone's sacrificing a little bit and think people are doing things that they want, which I think is very helpful in the real world. So that and the whole liberal arts education, where I feel like I know, people say I know a lot of things about many different topics, and that enables you to connect and build relationships with many different types of people, which is important, especially in developing your professional career and exploring different avenues. So I would say in terms of non-academic things that helped me the most, travel, talking to people on planes and trains and buses, becoming friends with people who were unlike me, unlike people who you might meet at Swarthmore, really challenging myself to get in the heads of people who are just fundamentally think differently than me, and to respect those points of view, which ultimately enables you to build relationships and create change. So, yeah.
My name is Alex Ginsberg. I graduated in the class of 2008. I currently run what's called the Search Fund, which means that I'm going to look for a business to buy. I'd say that the things that Swarthmore helped me improve and enhanced, one was initiative. So I think maybe there's some question about this lately. I've been following the meetings and stuff, but for the most part here at Swarthmore, the inmates run the prison. You guys get to determine a lot of what happens, especially true in the fraternities and I guess Theta as well. And that is, I think those are the people who differentiate themselves in the workplace that they're on. The people who just decide to do something and to see this is the right way to do it. And like Char was saying, go and fix problems. I think also not being afraid to engage in conflict intellectually. I think that's something that we do here at Swarthmore, and a lot of people outside of Swarthmore don't do that. I think also for me personally, it was like a level of introspection that many of my peers still to this day just don't have. And that allows you to figure out what you're actually passionate about. It allows you to figure out on a day-to-day basis what you enjoy doing, like flow work, and also where you're wrong when you're making mistakes and kind of how to correct them. And I think those three things are the key to kind of being flexible and also making a difference in your workplace. Non-academically, for me, war news radio, which was something that I didn't care that much for the journalism, but it showed me the kind of workplace I wanted to be in. And then dealing with things within the fraternity, and being a career peer advisor. Different things that help me kind of figure out what I want to do with myself.
Noah Lang, class 2010. I work in film production as a physical producer and an executive producer, which basically entails raising money. So a lot of that is salesmanship, and a lot of what I got out of my time here was an ability to articulate myself, my thoughts, my way I view the world, and the way I interact with people a lot stronger. And that's really like integral in the film world, especially independent film world, where at any given time there's 5 major agencies and 10 different boutique firms raising money for movies. Everybody is very passionate about what they're trying to do. So if you don't know why you're doing something, then no one's going to listen to you or let alone give you money to do it. And then the other really valuable thing was it's a volatile series of personalities and social circles here. Being able to navigate that for then working on sets, which is the most boring and also insane process ever, making films. Being able to meet people's needs in all these different departments and make sure things don't fall apart. Big part of that I would subscribe to, being able to navigate social circles and classes and personality types here to work.
Olivia Ensign, I was 2012, and I'm currently in law school, and to that point, the law school point, so that's kind of very much an environment bound by precedent, where creative thinking doesn't necessarily get you ahead, but I feel like what I gained from Swarthmore was the fact that I could come up with original ideas, I could defend those original ideas, and I could say things definitively and coherently in front of, whether it be a small seminar or law school sections, which are about 90 people. And I think that skill really kind of made me stand out, at least my professors, because in a situation that is so kind of not about creative thinking, the ability to be creative is really helpful. And non-academic things that really helped, one of them was student council. I feel like that gave me a lot of skills. And the other was the process involved in kind of founding Theta, getting that established, because that involves so much coalition building and so much talking to people who just did not want to listen, and dealing with the media, whatever that means on campus, and dealing with administrators. And so really I felt like that whole experience just gave me a really broad base set of skills in coalition building.
Melissa O'Connor, 2014. I'm a software engineer right now. What I gained from sophomore and what I didn't gain go hand in hand, because I didn't gain practical knowledge in computer science. But I was gifted with the skills to learn on my own and research and figure out how to solve these problems. So my boss will present me here's a new technology, go learn it. And I'm able to do that because of what I've done at Swarthmore. Yeah, go for it.
To say, for those of us who've done graduate school, I think would probably say that the thing about Swarthmore is you learn to take responsibility for learning in the classroom as well as outside. And at least my experience was that a lot of people don't feel that same sense of responsibility in the classroom that you do if you've been in small seminars like at Swarthmore.
It basically is grad school.
Yes.
It really is. You don't realize that until you go to grad school. You're like, I've already done this.
And you have your classmates freaking out about the thing you've been doing for 2 or 3 years already.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, my undergrad is only 108 papers, and that's what
Yeah.
some people do for masters.
Yeah,
back and come and articulate why, just because something's always been done a certain way doesn't mean that's how it should be done in the future. And I think not only in my classes did I learn how to sort of, come from that perspective and articulate an argument against doing things the way they've always been done, but also through the process of founding Theta, Olivia and two other students who are unfortunately not here today. But, all of us, I think, we sort of grew to understand how it's a struggle to go against the way things always were done. And like that, it was the ultimate education in founding Theta that, there wasn't a sorority here, there were fraternities, and having a vision of how things could be, and, the potential behind that, and sort of running with those ideas, and like Olivia said, coalition building, having to see things from other people's perspective, but then still saying, this is what I believe in, I'm going to push for it. So I just think, in addition to all the other things everyone else in this panel has said, for me personally, being able to sort of question using critical thinking and expressing my beliefs is my biggest takeaway from Swarthmore.
I'm Brandon Carver, 04. When I came to SWAT, I always knew that I wanted to teach, but then I became a special major in sociology, anthropology, and education for modern Black studies. And so, to borrow a phrase, teaching is the learning profession. So like, I knew I wanted to teach, but coming through here, and to really, elaborate on what Khadijah and Char are saying, I got a master's at Hopkins, which is now the #1 ed school in the country, and I was like, what did I just paid $15,000 to roll over what I just learned. Like, this is, and I got a phone call to ask for money. I was like, well, it really wasn't that challenging. They were like, really? I've never heard anybody say that before. I'm like, well, it wasn't. And I'm still in grad school, so I'm a poor guy. But yeah, so, it is, I've gone to Hopkins, I went to Maryland, I was at UMBC too, like, you don't get that type of, critical pedagogy really anywhere else, one. And so, what that does, in my profession is actually make me a better teacher, but also in my life, it helps you sort of, attack learning in a different way. So, that's on that side. But the other side, the other sort of thing I really took away from Swarthmore is really, it's you guys. This community is very special. The fact that I know just, if I have a question, I don't know, I can pick up the phone, shoot an email, shoot a text, and I can get the answer for something. That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing, and I trust it. So like I kind of almost cringe at the word network now because I feel like it's almost a dirty and almost pointless word, but
Yes.
sort of. But the people you engage with and the people you come in contact with here are very special, and if you keep them in your life, you're better for it. So that's what I think.
Yeah, we got Allison.
I'm gonna get a little dirty and follow on Brandon's comment about networking. I want to sort of reiterate a few things that I heard. That was an amazing amount of knowledge right there. But as it relates to networking, I think that's one area where Swarthmore really a little bit of learning. It is a very small community, and if you think you want to be a consultant or a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher, all you need to do is go onto LinkedIn, type in Swarthmore and teacher, Swarthmore and law school, and you will have a list in front of you of the 10, 40, or 60 alums from Swarthmore who are currently doing whatever it is you're searching for. Odds are, a good percentage of them, because of the nature of this community, they will be responsive to your inquiry. So it doesn't matter what you want to do, graduate school, sit on a beach, make money, whatever it is you want to do.
Can we do all of those?
Not in that order.
That's okay.
Beaches at the end. So, I would, one of the first things I would do in the next couple of days, if you haven't already, is open up a LinkedIn account and just do a little search to see if there are folks out there who might be helpful and instructive to you in your careers. And I would challenge each of you to send out an email or two to those folks and introduce yourself and see if there's not a connection and something you can learn from them.
internship. I contacted Swatties in DC and said I need a place to crash. I got an apartment for free in Georgetown for 5 months while everybody else was paying rent in DC. So like the network is not a joke. So like use it. And I yell at Brandon about this all the time because everybody loves Brandon, and so the mean girls doesn't make any sense. So like use the network. Like use the network.
So on that also, if I may, on all of our cards, you'll see that there's a QR tag. These link to our LinkedIn account, so that afterwards in the meet and greets, you should just tell us first. Don't be like the you know, just take whatever your favorite app is, go ahead and scan the QR tag. It'll also be down at the lodge.
I also have business cards.
Yeah, and I guess I would emphasize that. I think that's a really good point. And I actually got probably the first phone call from a Swarthmore undergraduate that I've gotten in like 10 years, and who just kind of wanted to shoot the shit about life outside of college and where to go and what to do and what he should focus on. That call, and I talked to more guys in Europe for like an hour, I reminded me of I never did that as an undergrad, and that's such a useful exercise to talk to somebody who's already been through. I hope it was for him a few kind of bends down the road. And I also think the network is bigger than Swarthmore. Like I like some folks on the panel. I got my first job definitely because of a Swarthmore connection. But broader than that, throughout my career, there's just people who are part of the liberal arts community who get what it means to have an education here. And when I see a resume from Williams or Swarthmore or I get that person knows how to write. Like at the very least, they might not be able to socialize. Ahead of 95% of the people that I end up interviewing and hiring. And so it's bigger than you certainly start with Swarthmore. I'm sure we got a lot of work to do there as a community to build that foundation, but it's bigger than that as well, and we'll see that pay dividends.
Yeah, I never understood the whole Greek thing at Swarthmore, precisely because I always felt like this was already easy enough. And I feel like this was a fraternity or sorority already, like in a certain way, and I think it functions like that. I mean, so I guess for those of you who are Greek, you get double time networking because you're already in a fraternity or sorority just belonging to Swarthmore.
I think there's a wider point too on the general emotional intelligence. They actually teach, like in law school orientation, they do something called an emotional intelligence orientation because if you think about it, it's all these like hyper high achieving people, very type A, who like may or may not have a lot of interpersonal skills, which is like not too dissimilar from Swarthmore in a lot of ways. And like what I found in my professional life, at least like when I was working before law school, people want to be able to like go to happy hour with you. They want to be able to talk about normal things, and like there have definitely been interviews where I may not have been as qualified as the person ahead of me, but I like was able to make an interpersonal connection with someone and make someone comfortable, especially because like so many people in positions of power can be very awkward people, and it's your job to make them not understand that they're being awkward and like put them into a little bit. So I also found like that was a skill that I maybe didn't learn as much at Swarthmore, but I think the networking is really important.
And just to add on to that, I've been approached multiple times by Filipino students, and I've always responded. And certainly, I support Alice's point about they could have just, like we all do, you click on it
You know, a lot of people in high school, you're kind of near the top of your class, and then you go to Swarthmore, and, you know, if you're like me, you're kind of maybe in the middle of your class, probably lower middle of the class for me. Then you go to business school, and you're at the top of the class again. Like, I don't think that's true for law school. I think law school, that is wicked tough. And probably not true for med school, that's wicked tough. But just keep that in the back of your mind, that if you really want to have it, if you can afford or get the loans, and you want to spend 2 years to be guaranteed a job and have 2 years of interviews and networking. Think about that. Keep that in the back of your mind for kind of 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Oh yeah, jump in.
I just want to say that the ability to write grants, which I think a lot of us who were leading organizations, the charters, having to write a charter grant, all of those skills are actually really useful in the real world. I was able to run the Ph.D. group for underrepresented Senate students at Penn. We had a budget of $20,000. We had to do tons of fun things. It's how I met my partner. So like, it's useful to have skills that allow you to know how to manage things and to how to like write a budget, how to write a grant. Seriously.
Great. So there's another topic which is interesting and it's sensitive, but it happens to everyone. It happens to everyone. And that is either experiencing bias or discrimination in the workplace because of where you went to school, how you look, what you believe. I'd like, you know, maybe all the panelists to just address how you handle those tough situations when somebody prejudges you because of your liberal arts education or for whatever it might be. How do you handle that that sort of situation? It's happened to everyone. It's even happened to me, right? The you know, white guy in the room. It's happened. It happens to everyone.
I'm going to hop in real quick because I'm going to have to take off in a second. But, you know, come late, leave early. This is something I've learned recently. It's about leadership, right? Increasingly, I believe that leadership is about having a core values, right? And confronting conflict with that core, right? Because sometimes there really aren't right or wrong answers, but you can at least say, you know what, this was the problem, this is who I am, this is my mission, this is whatever, and therefore this leads you to this. And so you can at least explain it and you can stand by it, right? So similarly, I remember like I was writing, you know, my first resume or something, and I was listing all the things that I did, you know, so I had like DU, and I had rugby, and I had you know, USA, and all this other stuff, and then somebody said, hey, do you really want to put that there? You want to put that up on yourself, right? And I said, nah, yeah, you know, no, so I took it out, right? You know, in retrospect, I really wish that I would, because, you know, you're going to get to a place, and very much like, you know, the talent search is about like, you know, dating. Am I going to like this place? Am I going to like the culture? Are they going to like me? So if this is who you are, own it, you know? And if they don't like who you are, you're not going to last there anyway. Because unless you're the CEO or somebody high ranking, you're not going to change all that culture around you, okay? So make sure that whatever it is that you are, you know, what you deliver in terms of work product and output, and also you deliver as a person, make sure you tell people that and show them. And that's hot. And not only people matter. See you all later.
I'll just go down this quick. I totally echo that. I think, like, I've had conversations with Swarthmore students who called me and they're trying to, and like, we get onto the topic of the interview, which I think has become so important. Like, your resume gets you in the door, the interview gets you the job. So, like, that interview part, people are really trying to figure out what do I need to be to get them to like me. I'm like, well, you should be yourself because, you know, if they don't like you, should go in with the mindset that if they don't like me, then obviously this isn't a good fit. But just to jump off of that, I think something that I've experienced in my role, and I'm sure everyone at some point in the, especially at the beginning of their careers, when you're young, I think people assume you don't know anything. And it's true, you don't know a lot. But regardless, I think even if you are young and inexperienced, you have things to bring to the table. And I feel like it's very difficult to be vocal about your ideas that you know, there will be times, I think, sometimes I'll come up with an idea, and I'll see something that's not working, and I'll think, like, we should really be doing it this way. And you learn in the beginning, like, months from now, someone more senior from you is going to say, yeah, we should really do it this way, and then you'll start doing it, and you'll say, but I thought of that first. So I think it's tough because they're like politics, and when you're younger, you don't feel like you have the authority to always say what's on your mind or say what you want. So I'm still struggling with that, and I think unfortunately, a lot of the confidence to speak your mind comes with experience, and you get more credibility as you go on. So it's just something to think about that everyone goes through it.
I've only been at my job for 4 months, so like luckily I haven't experienced anything bad yet. But the gender bias does exist, and I've heard stories about it. We build a financial software application. I'm an engineer, and then there are consultants, and the consultants deal with the customers directly. And I've heard stories where a customer will get online with a female consultant and ask to talk to an engineer directly. Whereas if they're hit with a male consultant, like they might work through the problem with them. But what if they got a female consultant and then were directed to a female engineer? Like, we don't know what would happen with that. And at least my manager is also a female, so just knowing that that bias exists and like having to be ready for it is something in your sciences.
So the percentage of black lawyers in America right now is 4%. And that to me, like I don't see that in my everyday world because I'm surrounded by lawyers of color, but it's not that high a number. And for me, I found the key as a woman of color is over preparation. So I better know exactly what I'm talking about all the time, and I better double check and fact check everything. And for me, it's like, and especially with stupid stuff like spell check, because like in an application from a person of color, those errors are going to be seeing so much less forgiveness than someone who's not of color making the same errors. So I think that's the only, there's no shortcuts. It's working harder and over preparation.
When I started out in film, I definitely had a chip on my shoulder, and a lot of it was because there's a perception of Swarthmore in, I think, certain industries that it's not really practical knowledge and like skills, it's just a lot of like intelligence. So I, with that in mind, I kept in mind that I had to work really, really hard, and as a result, became a coordinator after 6 months at a sales agency. So I was raising money, between $8 and $10 million for a slate of films. I had only worked in the industry for 6 months, so I had a lot to prove, and a lot of that was that I'm not just verbose and have strong opinions about foreign films. It's actually, I know industry trends, I understand like financial structuring and things like that. So, and I think it was actually a benefit in the long run, because when I decided to do things freelance, I had a really, really strong network of people who understood that I got it. I had a practical skill set, not just a kind of Swarthmore one.
I guess I'll take this from like a slightly different perspective, which is coming into a workplace as a white man who, in a place where there's other white men who are also managers, and kind of being expected to sometimes share opinions that I don't share about, or just say things or be okay with certain jokes. And I think that's something that essentially coming from Swarthmore, you learn a different level of a different way to express yourself, which things are unacceptable, and the hard thing is that you never really know, kind of like what Julia said about the politics, how do you respond to those moments. I think it's as Brandon said, you have to have the core, you have to work out from it, but that's something that can be difficult, and you have to build. I believe that like a lot of these issues aren't things that you solve in one conversation. I think they're things you build equity over time with people. It's the same way when you, for example, you have an employee, people talk about giving feedback, like you say one nice thing, you say a piece of feedback, and you say another nice thing. And I kind of think that's BS, because anyone who's smart enough to realize what you're doing will see you're just doing that just to make you feel better. It's the same way with things that are tough conversations to your peers about maybe things that they've said. You have to build equity over time, and so that you can have a real honest conversation with them. So I think that's the different perspective I want to bring to that. One other thing though is, so going to business school, in Swarthmore there's a lot of people with privilege, come from upper middle class. At business school it was conspicuous money. I mean, lots of rich people, and I'm not from that background. And so I had to, on the one hand, to be able to stand up for myself, that I can't just go to do all these things all the time. I don't have that kind of money. But on the other hand, to not judge people for that too, for their behaviors, and not to see them as just a bunch of dollar bills, and to see, as spoiled, and to try to get to know them beyond that and see the stuff that they've had to deal with. So I think in any of these issues, there's probably multiple sides, and it takes longer than one incident or transaction or conversation to figure out the right way to move forward with someone.
It's a tough one. I think, in a workplace, it's hard because a lot of times you're trying to build relationships with people, and then they can say something that's a little off the wall, and you don't want to go in there like, hey, PC, police, or whatever it is. It's a very difficult thing to negotiate. Or if someone, who is your senior, whatever the case might be, says something inappropriate about, yourself or your appearance or someone else, it's hard. I think that maybe it's something that gets easier with age. What I tend to do is just be, I'm usually a very lively, attractive person, and when something like that happens, I just kind of go silent, and maybe I could be more like, hey, that's not okay. But I think this goes back to what Alex was saying as well about equity. When you lead by example and somebody grows to admire you or think of you as somebody who's like, I don't know, a good person, for lack of a better word, and then they say something or do something and you're just not, I'm not really that impressed by your behavior, then I think that can kind of have an impact on them, or that building up over a number of interactions, and everyone just kind of acts from where they come from. So having passion for that and love for that person and not judging them, I think is important in all of these things as well.
I've definitely had experiences of bias in my career. Luckily, it hasn't necessarily been about bias towards me. One of the things I was just kind of looking at all of you, I was thinking, Swarthmore is actually one of the, as lacking in diversity as Swarthmore is, and as active as a conversation that was when I was here, it can be one of the most diverse experiences you have across the course of your life if your next step is to enter a Fortune 500 company, particularly in high tech. You really actually have a unique opportunity here. It was one of the reasons I chose Swarthmore, which sounds kind of weird, but that you can have a conversation with somebody of a different faith, a different race, and gender. Hopefully the rest of us have a chance to talk to people outside about gender. But to be in a culture where you can talk about sex, and you can talk about religion, and you can talk about the things that ostensibly make us different from each other, it's a real privilege. And to develop the skills and having that conversation can be really important for when you are later in an environment that lacks the diversity that this place has. You can identify some of what comes out of that. I can think of 2 hiring meetings I was in at companies that will remain nameless, where one was when you're in a kind of committee, basically, right, of people who have interviewed this candidate. Somebody threw in the classic with an African American candidate, noting how articulate this person was, right, like the sort of Joe Biden, foot in your mouth moment of ignorance. And then nobody really got why that was inappropriate, like why that was such a stupid comment. And another candidate was dinged because he asked if there was kosher food in the neighborhood, which, by the way, is a totally legitimate question in Seattle. Like, it's not an easy place to get kosher food. So I experienced, and those are not so subtle biases. I experienced the subtler bias of just being in rooms full of people, particularly in high tech, where the bias was towards hiring people like us. Sometimes that was called culture fit. Like that's how you describe that. And these aren't bad actors. These aren't people who are, I would say, much more racist than most of the people in this room. But they were definitely not particularly attuned to their racism. And I don't think these weren't necessarily coded words or even conscious attempts to be racist, but they clearly had racist effects. I mean, just look around the office. Like, there's a lot of white people and like a lot of men. And that starts because some white people and some men start the company, and that becomes culture fit. And the traits, and particularly in cultures that aren't particularly well developed, where you don't really know who you are as an organization, you end up in these committees of people that are hiring people just like you. Swarthmore at the very least gives you an attenuation to that, a kind of tuning for that language and that kind of development that can put you in a position, particularly as you have more and more positions of power, as nearly all of us in the room will be, to call that into question and actually to work for change.
I think I'm very lucky working for a company like Google because it is very similar acceptance-wise to Swarthmore. I think the tech world is definitely moving in that direction. I see it in the news all the time.
And Google's been great about, at the very least, kind of putting their dirty laundry out there about diversity and sharing that data.
Yes, I think diversity is another story, but acceptance is definitely something they've been pretty good at. And so I haven't, being a white male, I definitely haven't encountered any biases toward my race or religion. One thing that does exist in Silicon Valley, and I think definitely companies that like Google that are very engineering dominated. I'm on the sales side, so I work with a lot of engineers, but they definitely, I think, have more respect for people that have that software engineering background, that rigor, and the practical side that I don't have. I have the softer skills. So for me, I think it's all about preparation, and I'll definitely echo that. You have to be prepared, and you definitely have great things to bring to the table. You have that client conversation that the engineers in the back room oftentimes don't have, so you have really valuable information for them. It's just making sure that you can relate that to them in an effective way and make sure that they see your value from the outset so that they actually value your relationship with them going forward.
In situations like that, it's also about humility. I think it is preparation, but it's also about, especially in this engineering and non-engineering case, knowing what you don't know, being not BSing and saying that, oh yeah, it's this, but it's not. Which luckily Swarthmore is pretty good at making you do.
This whole line of mechanicking, I like to say. I'm a scientist, and diversity in the sciences is abysmal. The National Science Foundation, the NSF, publishes a paper every year or two. It's a report on all of the different demographics that get PhDs in the sciences or what they do with them and everything. And while gender equality has really come out of nowhere, and now women are 53% of the PhDs in the sciences, nice. They're still only getting something like a fifth or a fourth of the faculty positions, which is atrocious. And then and people of color getting PhDs in the sciences isn't even close to parity with the population. So I think it's really important to have a diverse researchers in all types of diversity. You're not always the same thing that everybody immediately thinks of, like race or ethnicity, but also how about gender, how about religion. Religion actually comes into play occasionally with genetics. I'm a geneticist. All of a sudden you have to talk about, the prevalence of this disorder in Ashkenazi Jews, right? And so you need to be able to think about that, and to have that consideration, sometimes the person has to have a personal connection to that, whatever that is that you want to study in the sciences. And so you can bring, I'll give this example I recently talked about, but I teach a human physiology class, and I have an African-American graduate student who works with me in my lab, and I wanted to give him some teaching opportunity in my class, and I said, hey, would you like to teach a course? And he said, yeah. I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And without hesitation, he says, the renal system. We're both neuroscientists, okay? And he says the kidneys. He wants to talk about kidneys. I said, why? Why kidneys all of a sudden? And he said, well, there's this really interesting thing about African Americans having high blood pressure that's actually due to a mutation that helped the Africans who were taken over across the ocean in the slave trade, helped them actually make it across the ocean with very little food and water, because it would absorb more of the salts and more of the water, so that they wouldn't get dehydrated and die. Those that did get dehydrated and died were, of course, now out of the gene pool on this side of the ocean. So this thing that helped, I don't know if you want to say helped, but they survived because of this gene mutation, okay, now is plaguing African American society because they have much higher prevalence of things like high blood pressure and heart failure. And I've never heard, I'm a neuroscientist, but I don't think that's an excuse. I've never heard that before. And that's freaking fascinating to me. And are people working on mutations, maybe gene therapy for that particular thing. And it's really interesting. And so if you don't have diversity in something like the sciences, you don't ask the right questions. And I think it's really important. So I didn't answer Rob's question at all, but I'm going to pass them. So diversity is important.
No, I think what you're saying is really brilliant because it points out, well, first of all, everything does lead back to slavery for everybody. Not matter more. All right. And it also reminds me, so in medicine, there was a study that showed that black people are perceived to not have as much pain as white people, right? So for the same illnesses, they don't prescribe the same kinds of pain medication for black people. And so there's an empathy gap, right? And so I have a friend, he's a Rhodes Scholar, he went to Harvard Medical School, he's a SWATty.
I've never heard that before, and so I just learned something right now.
Yeah, and so I was like, so you guys are all talking about this now, right? He's like, yeah, well, no, we haven't actually really talked about that study. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, what? Like, it was everywhere, right? I mean, at least in the popular press. But medicine, apparently nobody seems to care about the fact that they're not prescribing their patients the same medication based on race. And so I think part of being the white guy in the room means understanding that you are carrying white privilege everywhere you go. And so your ability to decide when you say something about the kind of violence, the rhetorical violence that's happening in the room, because it is violence. Violence to eclipse someone or to lower them or to imply that they're inferior, that you expected they were inferior. That's a form of violence. It's a certain amount of privilege that you get to kind of step in or step out whenever you feel like it.
I think
Yeah.
keep going.
No, and I graduated from Swarthmore telling myself that I will always have natural hair, and anybody who doesn't hire me because I have it will just not get all of me, right? So that was my personal line in the sand. I worked at the White House. When I was an intern at the White House, I had a Senate person someone who worked either in the Senate or in Congress, an aide, tell me like, oh, she didn't know I was working at the White House at the time. She wishes she could wear her hair like mine, but she needed to look more professional. She had really bad weave, as she said it. So it was a really funny moment too, right? And I was just like, oh, because one of my mentors who was like the director of political affairs at the White House is a black woman, dark skin with natural hair, right? So there's like, some of this stuff is true, but some of it is also things that we have to kind of figure out what our line in the sand is, and you have to push it. The other thing is, particularly for women of color, you have to just be ready to leave, to be quite honest. They've done lots of studies of women of color in academia and professional settings, and they found that a lot of times when they stay in the same place, they don't make very much money, they don't get promoted. People kind of get used to you as the black woman who does X or Y, right? So you have to be really used to. My first lesson in television, and one that I will always carry with me, I wish I had known going into TV, was be ready to quit. And when you're ready to quit, like have another job lined up, right? So I would go into an office and I'm like, they're not promoting me. Literally in the email when I left for grad school, where they announced my leaving, they promoted the white guy who had come in right behind me. They hadn't been able to promote him until I could leave, or they would have had to promote me because it would have been obvious that they were racist, which they were. So literally in the same email that they announced me leaving, they promoted him, right? So what that taught me was always be prepared to go, right? If you're not getting what you need, if people are overworking you, if they're not treating you right, if you feel like you're not advancing the way you should, look for something else and freaking leave. And for most women, actually, it helps you. It means that you get a promotion, you get a pay hike you probably wouldn't have gotten at the place that you're at, you get more experiences, you get a wider network.
You brought up some great points. I personally believe that discrimination is rampant. And if you don't hear it, it's because it's probably being said about you behind your back. When you hear it, sort of the privilege I think you were referring to. If you ignore it, if you laugh, whatever, it's condoning behavior and it kind of reinforces it. There's a right and wrong way to handle the situation. Sometimes it's kind of enough to make between 2 points is a straight line, right? Not always true, because if you want to get from point A to point B, and there's someone standing in your way, and you keep hitting at it, trying to go straight out like a bull in a china shop, you'll never get anywhere. Sometimes taking the longer route will actually get you to that point a lot quicker than if you keep running up against a wall. So, you know, as it relates to relationships with people at work, yeah, I think, you know, Swarthmore folks have a stereotype. Everyone in this room has a stereotype, and it's that you're pretty wicked smart. And I think, was it Amber who made the comment earlier? This is such a great comment, that you have to be working harder, or Olivia, working harder and being over-prepared. And that's true regardless of what you look like, who you are, what you believe. But it is actually quite true for a Swarthmore graduate, because the expectation is going to be that you're really, really smart. And when you graduate from here, you are really, really smart, but you probably don't know enough to do the job perfectly that you're being hired to do. The folks might be just thinking, oh, well, they'll just nail it. Well, you're going to have to keep working really, really hard and learning to be better than the folks around you. There is a bit of an expectation, but it's also just kind of smart career sense wherever you are to just try to learn better than everyone else around you, and always be over-prepared, because you never know when someone is going to try to you know, cut your legs up underneath you. And being able to communicate, which we've heard over and over and over again, is critical. If you cannot articulate what you believe and the direction that you want something to go in, you lose, even if it's the right idea.
And document. Like, write it down. Especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a woman of color. Write it, email it. It's like, oh, I just wanted to follow up on our meeting earlier about so-and-so. I just wanted to say thanks for letting me know X or whatever. You want to be able to, I know this all sounds very litigious, but really it means making sure you're protecting yourself.
It's also a really good way to prove yourself. So like if there's something you're interested in and it's kind of a lateral move, it's a really good way. Like I didn't know anything about physical production until I was going into film. And so I would do copious amounts of research and be ready to do those things. And then if someone slipped up, which sounds like kind of shady or like manipulative, but like I was ready to kind of take on those responsibilities. So I've always found that really helpful. By being over-prepared, you can kind of move into territories that you'd like to be. Like I didn't start where I wanted to be. I ended up there.
There's a little bit of a theme on our panel with respect to these questions of difference about, you know, challenge or, you know, maybe the threat that, you know, we face as kind of who we are working in various environments. But I would say also in my professional life, I've seen diversity and more of a point and ability to bridge cultures as an extraordinary power. Like I think Swarthmore actually, in a strange way, prepares you better than many, at least in my career, to have those kind of conversations. I think the benefit of working, particularly just thinking in high tech, you know, those companies are expanding in Asia, in India, in China, and the people who I see like leading whole organizations, managing thousands of people, are those individuals who have deep-seated emotional intelligence, real focus on being able to, partly it's practically bridging cultures, like language skills, but more fundamentally it's having the empathy and the intelligence and the wherewithal to kind of create links across cultures. Because those are the people who can build teams, who can get things done in international environments, who can work quickly, who can cut through a lot of that noise and turn it to their advantage. I'm unfortunately not one of those people, but I've had the benefit of working with more than a few real breakthrough leaders that have that kind of skill.
Just to echo on that, on a slightly different topic. So we've talked a lot about communication, you know, speaking up and writing. Introverts and extroverts. I think another really important skill is, so I'm more extroverted. I feel confident to speak my voice and my opinion early on, which means that I get to have a lot of influence in certain types of conversations. But actually, for me, one of the most important things I learned in business school, which is full of extroverts, was how to connect with people who aren't speaking up as much, and to draw them out and also to learn from them. And I think that's really powerful. That was a powerful lesson for me because I hadn't realized how much I was missing. But it's also something that you don't realize that sometimes you don't realize your own biases at work about, this person isn't that there's some people, you know, that spend all the time in the library, and some people that socialize a lot more. But the people who I think will ultimately do really well in whatever field they want are able to have friends and build those populations. I think that's something that I've learned more over time.
If I can jump in, I love that point. How many people in here are actually thinking about going to some form of graduate school? Medical school? So pretty much everybody. So I knew it was a stupid question before I asked, but I just wanted to do it. So if you, in picking, being wise and picking a great university to do your graduate work in, you get to kind of live in multiple worlds. So his example of in business school, you get to do all of this. I was in graduate school at a great university, and all my roommates were in the law school, and we would occasionally hang out at the business school for their lunches, because that's all we did. And so you get to socialize with all these different types of people, and that's a form of learning, you know, learning from the environment. And so
People who come to business school have the hours. We're usually at the bar, not fun.
I think they build a bar in the school now.
You know, something else that I think it tends to be more on the radar of women early in their career, which we haven't really discussed, is, and maybe I'm going kind of Sheryl Sandberg on all of you, but like this idea of like dialing back and not leaning in too soon. And you know, I think a lot of the things I recognize, in even though I work in a relatively diverse workplace compared to most firms on Wall Street, I'd say like something that even though it's talked about openly, there are issues still with the fact that women who have children have to dial back more because they have outside responsibilities. And then when you're in a workplace culture where people are expected to put in many hours at the office, you know, someone who's able to leave at 10 versus a mom who has to leave at 5, there are certain, I think it can work against you in certain ways. I don't think it always does, but I think it makes it harder to prove yourself when you work somewhere. If a lot of the FaceTime presence can play a part in performance evaluations, which, you know, it shouldn't, but unfortunately sometimes your image and exposure can be weighed heavily as opposed to your work product, or solely your work product. So I think like that's something that younger women who I've spoken to in the workplace are starting to think about. Like when I was at Swarthmore, I didn't necessarily think about that as much. Like I knew that it was something that was going on and being talked about. But I think once you get into the workforce and you start to see, you know, your coworkers who are moms dealing with these things and really struggling with putting all these hours in and juggling a family, it gets you thinking and gets you kind of worried about like how you're going to manage everything. And so, you know, I don't have the answers, but I know that I hope that as like the future goes on, that those are problems that are expected to put in many hours at the office. You know, someone who's able to leave at 10 versus a mom who has to leave at 5, there are certain, I think it can work against you in certain ways. I don't think it always does, but I think it makes it harder to prove yourself when you work somewhere. If a lot of the FaceTime presence can play a part in performance evaluations, which, you know, it shouldn't, but unfortunately sometimes your image and exposure can be weighed heavily as opposed to your work product, or solely your work product. So I think like that's something that younger women who I've spoken to in the workplace are starting to think about. Like when I was at Swarthmore, I didn't necessarily think about that as much. Like I knew that it was something that was going on and being talked about. But I think once you get into the workforce and you start to see, you know, your coworkers who are moms